like to introduce my dad, Chris.
Got a lot of stuff up here going on. I don't know what's going on here. Ba-ba-ba-da-da-da-da, shorty. All right. Hey, I'm Chris Alcoholic. I'm sobriety date is February 8th of 1989, and I'm extremely grateful for that. Thank you for asking me to come speak. It's always an honor and privilege to do anything for Alcoholics Anonymous. It's actually, when I walked in these rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, it was undesired and undeserved, and one thing I wanted to do was not drink, and I had no idea what Alcoholics Anonymous was about. Back in the 80s, it wasn't put on every channel, and you didn't hear about it a lot. It was very hidden, and I thought AA was AAA, so I didn't understand why I needed car insurance at the time. But if I'd only known what gifts were going to be granted to me as the years went on, then man, I'd have jumped in here quick. So I just want to thank Mo. It's funny because it's like Mo asked me if I would come speak, and it's a miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous is this: when your ex-wife really wants you to hear anything that comes out of your mouth after the divorce, that's a miracle, you know? So I'm grateful for that. And I honestly believe that the family system that we have today with my kids and their kids and our, you know, exes and currents and all the stuff that we have going on is definitely a gift from Alcoholics Anonymous. It wouldn't be that way if we were drinking. Yeah, it just wouldn't be that way. So yeah, let's get going. I know some of you guys get sober as fast as we can, you know, gotta go outside and smoke and all that stuff if you still smoke. COVID thing's kind of weird. It's like I've actually had the opportunity to speak this year on Zoom, and I was one of those guys when Zoom first came around and the meetings of, you know, all the stuff, I was like, oh, ha ha, Zoom meetings, what is that? Man, God, thank God, it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing for Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, it got brought to my attention by one of the people I sponsor. It's like, think about it from when this thing first came around in the 30s, you know, in the 40s, when there wasn't a meeting on every corner, and they would have been, if Zoom would have been present back then, they'd have just eaten it up. They had to do letters and phone calls and all that stuff. So to have something so hands-on as Zoom during a time of COVID's been actually a gift. So my ego was corrected very quickly around what Zoom meetings were about and the lives that were able to save because of Zoom. I didn't start drinking until I was 11 years old. I started to try to wait as long as possible. I could have probably started drinking way before then if I'd had an opportunity to do it. I did have little sips of alcohol. I always talk about the sips of alcohol, but there was something different between a sip of alcohol, a swing of beer from my grandfather. There was a difference between that and the actual time I began to drink. And I talk about that moment because that moment when I was 11 years old, the phenomenal craving developed at that very moment. Things happened that night that had never happened before. So my grandfather was a good alcoholic. He drank Schlitz beer with the big steel cans that weighed more than a weight. You know, he was the guy who had the lazy boy. In my family, the real alcoholics had lazy boys, and they cooked on the grill. No one ever touched the grill or their lazy boy. And I'd always wonder why my grandfather had the lazy boys, because I realized that he would drink, and when he got ready to pass out, he'd just hit that lever and he'd go backwards and good night, right? And I remember at an early age looking at my grandfather and his drinking, and he'd have those Schlitz beers sitting up on the windowsill, and then he would smoke, you know, whiffs of cigarettes, and he'd flip those ashes in those empty beer cans. And I remember watching the sun as it would come through the window, and I remember it hitting the dew off that cold, you know, Schlitz beer. And I remember everything looking so perfect. I remember him coming from a hard day's work, and he'd have a couple of those beers, and somehow he found a sense of ease and comfort that I, since then, know what we're about when it comes to sense of ease and comfort. Is like I would look for that in any given day. It's funny how one little small can of beer would give you a sense of ease and comfort, or one little shot of alcohol, or one little glass of wine would give me that that I so needed. So when I watched him drink like that, I had no idea I'd be an alcoholic at some age in my life. So I remember watching him and the magic of alcohol that happened with him. And I remember the one day that he walked away to go to the bathroom, and that was my opportunity to go actually find out exactly what this thing was about. So he walked in there, and and I walked up to the cans of Schlitz beer, and I went through each can because I had to be careful. The one that didn't have, he'd been flipping ashes in it, like, for days, right? He had 6 or 7 cans lined up on there, so I had to look for the one that was the right can. And I remember looking at the top of it. There was no ashes. It was the dew that was still running down the sides, and it was cold to the touch. And I remember grabbing it up, and I remember while he was gone taking a big swig, it was the wrong can. He had been flipping ashes. And I stood there, and I was a young child, and I remember standing there with a big mouthful of Schlitz beer and cigarette butts and a Winston butt that was connected to my lip because it kind of stuck there. And I remember sitting there going, "What am I going to do?" And this is when you're 6 or 7 years old, this is a way bigger choice or a way bigger decision than the third step decision. Like, this is big, whether I'm going to spit it all over the floor and get caught, or I'm going to swallow it and try to work my way around with this butt and figure out a way to get out of this situation because I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. So I remember putting the can down and turning it just like he had it. I remember wiping the edge of the can, and I remember still hanging on with a butt and a big mouthful of Schlitz beer and ashes. And I waited to hear the doorknob rattle from the bathroom. And once that happens, I remember taking the butt off and putting it back in the can and moving forward and kind of watching the door when it opened. It was my opportunity to swallow, and I just took it all down. And I remember, I think a normal kid at that moment would have said, "I'll never, ever do that again. That was the nastiest thing." My thoughts were, "I'll have to watch him closer next time." That was it, right? Because I'm going to get away with it next time. This time, it wasn't the best experience, but I'm going to try one more time. No one could ever fault me for quitting too early, right? So, and I did it a couple times. But the important part of that story was, the phenomenal craving didn't develop. And I didn't know what that was about till I got sober, but I didn't understand that I had this alcoholism thing. I didn't understand that I had twofold illness, threefold if you add in the spiritual malady. I get all that, but every human being in the world has spiritual malady. The thing that's singular to us that no individuals ever have, no average tempered drinker has, is the twofold, which is the mind and the body, right? That the physical allergy that I have, that alcohol happens to me, what happens to me when I drink alcohol never occurs in the average tempered drinker. Then I have this mental obsession that takes place when I don't have my drink, right? And I need to have my drink in order to crave that phenomenal craving, the mental obsession that takes place. The mental obsession it gets me to buy the big lie that this time it'll be okay, this time it'll be different. I didn't know I had all that then. And it didn't happen then. Like, I didn't drink alcohol that day at my grandfather's and then run into in the refrigerator and drink all his beer and steal his money and take his car. That happened later, right? None of that happened that day. And so I moved forward in my life, and in age 11, the miracle took place. And I grew up in a feeling of damaged and broken. And I don't know if you know what that's about, but for me, I felt damaged and broken, like I was damaged goods. Like when you walk in a supermarket and you go down the canned vegetable aisle and that dented can that nobody wants, that's how I felt. You walk in the fruit section, the single bananas that nobody wants, they always grab the bunches of bananas. That's how I felt, like a single banana. Today, my kids will tell you, when we go buy bananas, I buy all the single bananas. I just do. They matter. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of, that's just it. And I felt like that, and I felt broken and damaged, and I don't know, I can't blame it on alcoholism, I can't blame it on the family, I don't know where that came from. No one ever looked at me and said, "You're broken." But for some reason, when I started collecting evidence on how I don't matter in my life, and I collect a lot of evidence as a kid, and now knowing that for me as a kid, I was a great listener, but a horrible interpreter, right? And something didn't fit right in my life, automatically took it in as personal, something about me that was broken. And, I given today, I can look at it maybe a spiritual malady that I suffer from, that was a spiritual illness that we have, that for me, it was deep, it was dark. So when I was 11 years old, I remember walking to this party. It was a high school party. I'm already, less than everybody in the party. And I remember going in there, I was younger, and I walked in there, didn't know a soul, but maybe one person. And I remember the miracle of alcohol took place that day, and I drank that first drink, and I drank that second beer, and something happened magically that moment that had never happened before, and I would go on for the rest of my drinking career trying to grab that moment once again. And it was when everything was just okay. It wasn't that I was better than anybody or I was less than everybody. There was no broken and damaged conversations. There was no Superman. It was just that I was just like you, And I remember that night of that party, I can remember everything about that night. I can remember who was there, how it was. It was a complete room full of strangers, but maybe one person. And then at the end of the night, I had a whole host of friends. And and it was this thing that I'd longed for, to be accepted, to be complete, and to be a part of. And finally, for the first time in my life, I actually felt that feeling that night. The adverse reaction that happened to me that night of alcohol, not only the phenomenon of craving developed, but that 11-year-old kid could drink a 6-pack of beer and probably almost a half a fifth of alcohol and make it home that night, pass out and not die, and wake up the next morning ready to do it again. That's an adverse reaction. I think a normal 11-year-old would probably go that distance and either go to the hospital, or they would wake up. They probably never be able to take in that, ingest that much alcohol. But for me, it was kind of how it was. And from early on, I could drink as much alcohol as a lot of grown men. And I used to use that as a notch on the belt, as look at me drink. I didn't realize it was a part of my condition. That I have an adverse reaction to what alcohol does for me than normal people. I look for the sense of loss of control. I want to lose my control. I want to be out there and crazy and nuts. And some people, they drink a glass of wine, and when they start feeling that out of control, they stop. That was not my experience. That night I went home and I got in trouble, and I was caught, and consequences never got me sober. I always tell people, it's like, for years I thought a bottom was I was going to prison at 17 years old, and that was my bottom. And the fact is that jail had never got me sober before, and that was not my bottom. Bottoms are not physical. Bottoms are emotional deal. Bottoms, the way the big book describes it, is the pitiful incomprehensible demoralization. Whatever that looks like to you, whether it be break a fingernail, whether it be leave your kids at the daycare and forget about them, whether it be go to prison, murder somebody, or whatever it may be, that's your deal. But whatever happens, that moment of clarity that I had around that pitiful incomprehensible demoralization, where I knew that once I drank again, that I would either die or end up in the rest of my life in prison, that alcohol had mastered me, and then I was done. That was my bottom. And now that night of I was 11 years old, I didn't really think that one day it would happen, it would occur. I went on a drinking tear for the next 6 years, and my drinking career only lasted 6 years, but it was full tilt boogie like your hair's on fire every day, all day, as much as I can ingest. And in that moment, after 11 years old, nothing happened negative that night. It was all positive. I had a great experience, had great friends now. I felt whole and complete. I felt that I was the life of the party. I felt all those great things. Nobody went to jail, nobody went to prison, nobody got shot, nobody got stabbed. Nothing happened negative at all, except for my mother catching me, and that was it. Everything else was positive that night. I had no reason not to do it again the next day. And that night, I was with an older woman. It was great. I was 11, she was 13, What a woman. The truth of the story was she'd already puked all over herself, and I kissed her anyway. That was scary. And I didn't tell you that was kind of a pattern of my drinking, I went on that night, and I went home, and the next day I woke up with that. I thought right then was that commitment beyond convenience, that I'm going to do this for the rest of my life as hard and fast as possible. I didn't realize that what I was doing wasn't a commitment, that what I was doing, the power of choice was gone. Already at 11, the power of choice of drinking alcohol was gone. I was going to drink no matter what. It did not matter. And I knew that the phenomenon of craving, the obsession was already on me out of the gate. And I remember waking up with a hangover and didn't understand that. I'd never had that before. And I remember moving forward and drinking that day, and the headache going away. And I felt, once again, like I fit. Like I was a piece of the puzzle, and I finally got to go, And so I did this hard as fast as I can. Growing up, it's like I had a lot of different other substances I put in my body, besides alcohol, but I respect and I love our traditions in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I talk about alcohol. When I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, I would qualify as an alcoholic. If you read page 44, that hits me perfect, right between the eyes. I am an alcoholic, right? So I definitely will stick to singles of purpose of what AA is about. Right? If I'm in another 12-step program and I qualify for that, I'll talk about that other stuff. But today, we'll stick strictly with alcohol. Because alcohol is the whole reliable, right? That was always around. I knew exactly what I'd get if I drank that much, and I could always find it. It was a lot easier, to find alcohol than it was a lot of other stuff at that early age. And in my drinking career, it's like I can go through and talk about all the things that happened, all the consequences of my drinking. But for the newcomer, it doesn't matter about consequences. I got real clear. The only thing that matters is the two things that you and I have in common 100%. If you're the real alcoholic, like me, if you're the real deal, then you can relate with me on one thing 100%. The rest of it, you grew up in a different neighborhood, different families, different child, whatever it may be. You're different, I'm different. We can't relate 100% on everything in your life except for two things. And that is the obsession to drink, and that is, the great obsession that we have that nobody else has, and the mental obsession that happens, and the physical craving that happens once I put liquor in my body. Those are the two things. And so throughout my drinking, that never went away. Throughout my drinking, that became worse and worse, that I would take more risk in order to get drinking, to get the alcohol. I would do other things outside of my values and my morals because of alcohol. I would go for it and do things that for me, I looked like my life became, I came from this kiddo, I came from in a teenager, and all of a sudden I became something that I look at today as, if I could label it, would be kind of like a maggot. That's just how it was. I had no feeling towards whether I hurt you or didn't hurt you. Like I had nothing there. It was like I was almost, I love how the big book goes and talks about types. And in Doctor's Opinion, he goes through the types of alcoholics. The psychopathic type, check. The depression type, check. I just couldn't go down the list, right? If you ever read that, go back and look at Bob and Bill, you'll see Bill, check. Bob is the last one. Normal in every respect except for alcohol is concerned, right? It just seems to be their history. But I can really identify with the Bill type, right? The psychopathic type, the depressive type, all that stuff. And that's kind of how that was for me with drinking. When I got sober, I was 19 years old. I'd been in and out of jails, institutions, and all that stuff, and the phenomenal craving was huge. Once I put it in my body, I couldn't quit no matter what. It didn't matter my age, you know. A lot of people, when you got sober, I got sober at a very early age, and a lot of people think that's got something to do with it. Whether I got sober young or older, it doesn't matter. You know, when you're done, you're done. And at 17 years old, I kind of basically, I'd lost my freedom, and I was looking at some big time stuff, and I pretty much pushed away everybody in my family. I pretty much felt like I was alone in the world. I threw away scholarships and stopped playing sports and school and failed out and all that stuff that we do as a result of whatever behavior I had going on. So then I'm 17 years old, and something took place on an evening of February 8th, and well, it was actually February 6th, and I ended up in jail. I remember waking up that morning in jail, and I had this moment to where I knew that alcohol had me. It was a part of the big book in page 30 where it talks about conceded in my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic. That's the first step of recovery, right? So when I literally conceded in my innermost self was that morning. Like every time I wake up in jail, it was never, I'm a drunk, I'm licked by alcohol. It was your fault, their fault. If I'd have just taken a left instead of a right, it was all the other things on why I was in jail. It was never once ever clarity like that. And I remember waking up that morning, I had this moment to where the windows were smaller, the door was smaller, the buzzer was really loud, and I remember waking up and them shackling me down one more time like as a dog, because it's an aggravated crime, and I'm walking the red line, I'm going to see my mother, and it was the first time in my life that I fully conceded to my innermost self that I was done, that I'd tried every avenue to drink successfully and it wouldn't work. And my mom was sitting in a waiting room, and she had these big crocodile tears, and I walked in there and I sat down in front of her. It was the first time I noticed it. And the way I look at it is I was asleep dreaming, I was awake most of the time. And this was the first moment of being awakened. It's like all of a sudden I was awake to someone else's pain, that my mom was suffering from what I was doing. And I remember her looking at me and going, well, you did it this time, you're done. You know, they're looking at a plea bargain of 10 years. That's not a plea bargain. What a bargain is that? I mean, I was 17. I didn't want nothing to do with that stuff. And I didn't really care about that. I just didn't want to drink anymore. And I mean, that's really it. I'd have done whatever it took. And like I said earlier, I didn't know what it looked like to go to treatment or alcohol or AA. I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous or AA. I had no idea, but I knew that I didn't want to ever drink again. So I asked my mom, I said, I need help. I'm an alcoholic. And it was the first time I'd ever admitted it. And the first step, it talks about the word admit. And I got to get clear on the definition for the word admit. Me coming here and just telling you guys I'm an alcoholic, that is not necessarily an admission. That could be just a declaration, saying it out loud. When I go to my innermost self down here and I truly admit it, and the definition for the word admit means to let in. When I truly let it in, like that morning of February 6th, 1989, when I really went, oh my God, I am an alcoholic, and I got it down here. It was just down in my soul, I knew that I was an alcoholic. And I told my mother that morning, that was the first time I'd ever truly admitted I was an alcoholic. And I told her, and I said, I just want to do whatever it takes to go, to get help. And it's funny because God works in weird ways, because God was like all of a sudden creating this thing that was going on with my mom and some guy that she met that was a friend of some friend that knew this other person that knew this other person that had actually gone to treatment. And it was just this whole series of events that took place that were way outside of my control, what I even knew was going on. And then all of a sudden, my mother happened to know of a place that she could send me, and that we didn't know about 6 months before that. By this time, my mother had found Al-Anon, and my mom had been different. My mom had seemed different. I remember walking in and leaning up against the door, as I did most nights. If I came home, I'd lean against the door. By the way, I think God made door frames for alcoholics, so you lean against, you know what I mean? And I would lean against that door frame, and I'd look at it and go, hey, I'm home. And I would get the 20 questions, and we smell your breath and all that stuff. And I remember one night, before I went to jail, that I remember one night I walk in, I lean against the doorway. She was reading a book. Later on, I found I was one of the Al-Anon literature. And I looked at her and said, hey, I'm home. And she was, hey, I'm glad you're home. I love you. And that was it. And I knew when I turned away, I was like, ooh, something's not right. And I went, you know what I mean? Like, she'd found a program that she was able to be okay with whatever I was doing. And then when the time came that I would reach out for help, she knew exactly what to do. And all of a sudden, she went to an old probation officer. She called her at home. You know you've been in trouble a lot as a kid if your mom has the home phone number of your old probation officer, and they've been connected for the past couple of years. You know what I mean? So she called a lady named Joan Donovan. Joan Donovan went to the judge. This is all, like, I didn't know any of this till later on. And she went to the judge and told the judge about me, and that she would, whether he would send me to treatment or not. And Judge Brown, I went in front of the judge one morning, and he goes, your mom has done this stuff. And Joan Donovan was kind of leaned up against the up there by the judge's podium. She was leaning up against that, and Jones kind of smiled at me because she knew, right? And I got to get to go to treatment. Now, I don't necessarily say that everybody's got to go to treatment. It's literally kind of like an outside issue to Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe still today that the best percentage of people getting sober is walking straight in those doors, right? I mean, treatment centers are great, but there's not, it's not part of what we're about. This is about AA. And I'm really clear on that, and I could talk about that because I believe treatment has watered down Alcoholics Anonymous. I can say that because I've been in the treatment industry almost 30 years, right? I can talk bad about us. We've done it, right? Alcoholics Anonymous had a way about it that was really working, and all of a sudden we get in and start mixing things up and telling people to go to treatment all the time, which is great. People need that. Dr. Silverwood talks about treatment. He talks about literally basically a detox of 6 days. And that's about it. It wasn't a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day. Now it's great for me. I need to go to treatment. I needed to get away. So my mother sent me to treatment. I go to treatment. I had no idea what AA was. I couldn't leave the grounds of the facility because if I left the grounds of the facility, that'd be a violation. I'd go back to jail. So while in treatment, I stayed 6 weeks just hanging out there. And what saved me was this. The third night I was there, I believe, it was the third night, a guy walks in with a book in his hand. Now, by this time, I'm 17, I could barely read, and I could barely write. I could write, but my spelling is still horrible, right? I call it creative writing, by the way, right? And I'm sitting there, and a guy walks in. They're going to chair this inside meeting, and this guy walks in with a big book, and he breaks it open. He begins to read about this illness that we live with. And when he began talking about this illness, something registered with me, because for once in my life, I felt like, what? I have an illness? I'm not damaged? I'm not broken? Like, I'm not messed up? I'm not what everybody tells me I am? I'm not what I think I am? Because I could barely look in the mirror because I hated myself so much by this point. It was the first sign of hope I had. At the same time, I didn't have a lot of hope because this guy was telling me about this stuff around what I'm living with is going to kill me if I don't do something different. And thank God for good sponsorship and H&I committees, because from that moment on, I was taught some things about Alcoholics Anonymous that I still hold true today. I still believe that we have a daily reprieve. Now, a lot of people say that in the meeting, go, I have daily reprieve, I'm so grateful. Not me. Daily reprieve, the word reprieve means a stay of execution. If you're like me and you're sitting on death row and a warden comes in and they're supposed to execute you at midnight, and you've already said goodbyes, you've already had your last meal, you've already had your last rites written, and they shaved your hair. I don't know why I always go to the electric chair, but that just seems like the way to go, right? And you're ready to die, and you're prepared. You prepared yourself to this point. 5 minutes until they come get you. Also, the door rattles open, the warden walks down, and he looks at Chris and goes, hey, Chris, we're going to kill you right in 5 minutes, but we decided we've changed our mind. We're not going to kill you today. And you'd go, oh, thank God. And no, Chris, let me back up. We're not okay today, but we're still going to kill you. But see, next time you're not going to have time to talk to your family. Next time you're not going to have your last meal or your last rites. You're not going to be able to prepare or get mentally ready or anything. We're just going to come grab you up night or day, whether you're asleep in the shower, whether you're just sitting around hanging out. We're going to come grab you up then, and we're going to execute you, and you'll be done. That's a reprieve. For me, or a smart person, be like, no, kill me now. So what it's telling me is I have a daily reprieve, right? That one day I will die from alcoholism. that one day this illness will kill me. And if I grab hold of that and I believe in that and I live in that, then what it is, then the second part is much more important. Second part is contingent on one thing only, the maintenance of a spiritual conditioning, right? The maintenance, big word. That if I maintain the spiritual stuff, every day is a different day. I've got to maintain it like a car. If I don't keep up the maintenance, it eventually slowly breaks down. And same thing with this illness. If I don't continue the maintenance of the spiritual conditioning, then one day, eventually, I will die from alcoholism. And I don't want to die from alcoholism. So when these guys were explaining this stuff to me, the H&I stuff, and it was the first time I really wrapped my head around to have an illness that's going to kill me. And man, for me, the first step was not, yay, I'm on the first step. It was like, oh God, this thing is horrible. And I could look at my history and see how many times I should have died, how many times it should have happened, all this stuff, and I got real clear on the level of the illness is going to kill me. It's fatal. And if I go back and read some of the stuff, it talks about being fatal. It doesn't say lightly hurt, right? The big book is very clear on being fatal. And for me, I didn't want to die from this thing. So the maintenance of spiritual conditioning from early on has been like the one thing that's been driving me, just to continue on with that spiritual condition, to continue on trying to seek God, find God, all that. And through that experience, I've been able to go back and read, like in the first big book, and I'll go back and read, the fourth edition, third edition, second edition, the first edition, be able to look at the stories behind that stuff around how they used to be around, got drunk, got to AA, found God, got drunk, got to AA, found God. And then more of the later on stuff like the third and the fourth edition, all of a sudden they move into got drunk, found AA meetings, got drunk, found AA meetings, right? And for some reason, there's a change in it, and this has been my experience. It's not in the book, so you can leave it, you take it or leave it. But for me, what it does is it brings me back to what is important, right? So the things I learned in my first year of sobriety still live with me today, which is this. When all else fails, I work with an alcoholic. I don't go to a meeting. I may go to a meeting to find the alcoholic. I may go to the meeting to work on stuff. But what happens for me as a drunk is if I'm having a bad day and I walk into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and then the way the book talks about it is they talk about that philosophically comforted, and we all sit around and talk about sobriety and God, we all walk out feeling better. That hooks me. And all of a sudden when I'm having a bad day, I'm going to go to a meeting, I'm going to have a bad day. And I begin on the cycle where meetings become my solution. And meetings are a place for me, and what was taught to me was that meetings were a place for me to be the pep rally of hope for the newcomer. That you too can go. You too can stay sober. Here's how. And it's also the teachings of the 12 steps, what Bill says in 1969, that should be our purpose, our sole purpose for meeting, is teaching the newcomer the 12 steps. And these are all the things I learned like literally like early on, right? And I didn't know any of this stuff. I had no idea. I just knew I didn't want to drink anymore, but I didn't really know how to do all the work. And I got out and I started going to my first outside AA meetings. You guys told me to find a sponsor. I had no idea what a sponsor even was. I thought, are they going to pay me to hang out and play for them or something? I came from the sports world. I had no idea what that looked like in AA. And all of a sudden, you guys said, hey, get a sponsor, you want what they have. Well, that didn't make any sense to me because this old dude walks up, his name's Bobby Crocker. And I had nothing, I didn't want anything from Bobby Crocker. Like, Bobby was old, I didn't want to be old. Bobby had a job, I didn't want to have a job. I was 17. And he was married, and I damn sure didn't want to be married. You know what I mean? I didn't want anything that he had except for, on a bad day, Bobby loved his job. On a bad day, Bobby loved his wife. And on a bad day, Bobby loved how old he was. He was grateful for being sober as long as he was. And Bobby became more than a sponsor to me. Bobby became the safe man in AA for me, the safest man I'd ever met up to that point. Bobby became my everything. And Bobby led me down a path, and I had to trust and believe in everything Bobby said because I had nothing else to trust and believe in. And Bobby took me through the first several steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he took me through the first step, and he began to talk to me about what the first step talks about. I didn't have no idea that in the first step there's actually, there's a break in the sentence. There's like two different parts. I had no idea that the powerlessness that the first step talks about is not my life. It's about the only thing that we can identify with, which is what? When I put alcohol in my body, I'm powerless over it because it's going to set off the phenomenon of craving. Then the second part of it, I didn't know this either. Second part of the unmanageability is not about my life. It's what we can relate on 100%, which is, man, I wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning with a firm resolution not to drink again. I'm not going to do it. Feeling shame and remorse of the night before. I quit. I'm done. 8 o'clock in the morning. And by noon, what am I doing? I'm drinking again. Like I have lost the ability to manage a choice on whether I drink or not drink. It's like I tell you with all earnestness and all sincerity, I'm never going to drink again. And by noon, I'm looking for the drink. I bought the big lie. And I didn't realize all that, right? I mean, I got when I got here, I heard the same thing a lot of people heard, which is, oh, I'm powerless over my life, and my life's unmanageable because of all the physical things. It's not about that. It really boils it down to the only thing we have in common around alcoholism, not outside of our life. Now, of course, my life was just trashed. You know what I mean? But I could wrap my head around that because I could see it. I had history around my alcoholism stuff, my alcoholic self. So then I move on, and I get this guy, and he's telling me to do this third step with him, and I began to look at my God stuff. And what I got clear on around God in my second and my third step was huge, because I didn't have any God stuff. I didn't go to a church when I was growing up. I didn't have any experience. The only thing I knew about God was filtered through other people's egos. I didn't understand what God was even about. I knew there was some God up there, but it wasn't the God for me. And I knew that I was automatically going to hell if it was a Christian God, and I couldn't wrap my head around anything else. It's funny how I was born into a life where I had prejudice around God. I had prejudice around religions and churches, but I didn't go to any church. I wasn't religious, but I still had those prejudices that were infused in my body, infused in my mind and my soul, to the depth to where it literally still today, those prejudices will still pop up around God, spiritual matters, spiritual terms, right? Pop, pop, pop. And then my second step, when Bobby looked at me, he goes, it asks you to honestly ask yourself what spiritual terms mean to you. And it talks about the prejudice. Don't let prejudice stop you from honestly asking yourself these things. What are spiritual terms, Chris? And I remember sitting there going, God doesn't like me. You know, God doesn't like me. He's some big dude up in the sky. It's going to shoot me down with lightning bolts. And because of all the things I've done, I'll never be forgiven. Matter of fact, I'll never get sober. I don't think this is ever going to work. And Bobby went, awesome. That's great for a start. I went, what? Like, aren't I supposed to just give you a whole bunch of fluff about how I love God and that's it? And he's like, no, it tells me right here. It's no matter how limited your belief is, it is a belief. But I've got to start from a truth. I can't start from a wish or a want. And I went, okay, because he goes, if your truth is God hates you and that God doesn't love you and God is going to abandon you again, or whatever your belief has been over the years, it's enough for a start. Because all you're looking at, Chris, is this. You're looking at one thing only. Is there something greater than you, period? It doesn't say greater than you is going to take care of you and give you happiness and wealth and blah, blah, blah. It says one thing. Is there something bigger than you? And I said, yes. So I started there with God. God didn't like me, but I was given a gift to come in here. Then all of a sudden, God stood for a group of drunks. I could vision a group of people like you that were stronger than me, smarter than me, that knew how to stay sober much more than I did. And so I believed in you guys. Not one in particular person, not a Coke can, not a doorknob, not a tree, you know, things that were greater than me. And the way the book describes it, talks about something that's greater than me and something that I could understand. The two things, right? And then since then, man, God is like, it's been just different. It's just all over the place. It's crazy. Then also we went to my third step, and I got down on my knees with some old dude that I didn't trust because I didn't like old people, because I've been abused or left by old men, right? Men in my life were nowhere. And so I had to trust somebody because my life depended on believing everything this guy said. And I know the desperation of alcoholism was right there, and I was so desperate of drinking, I didn't want to drink no more. I was desperate. So then therefore, you know what? My trust is out the window. I'm going to stand here with this guy, sit with this guy, get on my knees with this guy, and do the third step stuff. And I did all the third step stuff, and I moved directly into an inventory. And when he talked about doing my inventory, I was terrified of writing all that stuff down. But the way he broke it open for me and simplified it was so beautiful that it made it just real easy. And I believe that's the way it kind of was supposed to be, is just simple. You know, it's bullet points. He'd tell me, Chris, you just need to know the milk is spoiled. You don't need to know what cow it came from, why they brought it to wherever you live. You don't need to know where the cow, like what stockyard it was at, what feeding yard, what did it eat the night before it had the milk. You don't need to know any of that. You just need to know in your inventory the milk was spoiled, period, right? And when I broke down this inventory the way that he designed, the way he told me to, and the way that they designed it in the big book, it made it simple enough for me, for somebody who could barely read and write. Still today, my reading and writing is still rough. I still read with my finger. I still read a meditation book in the morning, and I cannot tell you what I read. I misquote the book all the time. I'm not one of those guys that can break it open and pow. Thank God, because I have to go back and read it all the time to remember it. I have a disconnect between my eyes and what my brain does. Always has been, right? Thank God for people like Bobby Crocker. A guy I met in treatment named Roy, and Roy was 16 years old. He was suicidal. He was the hairiest person I ever met in my life. He started shaving at 7. And he came in, and I'd never had a best friend before till Roy. And Roy walked in, he had long black hair, and his goatee, and he smoked Camel cigarettes, and he looked like Jesus. And so with Jesus smoking a Camel, we and him became best friends. And we've been best friends for years and years and years. And he was the first guy that I'd ever met that I actually had just a friendship, man, just an actual authentic relationship as a man. And he was the fifth step before the fifth step, right? So Roy and I became best friends. If it wasn't for Roy and Jesus, Jesus Smoking a Camel and Bobby Crocker being able to break down the AA Big Book for me, I don't know where I would be today, because I didn't know what a lot of the words meant. Then he'd give you a dictionary, but I didn't know what those words meant either, right? So these guys would literally sit me down and read line by line, word by word. Going to my fifth step, my sponsor would tell me things like, I always thought he made this stuff up. I didn't realize he got it from other guys. And he'd go, oh, you'll take the fifth or drink a fifth. Oh, wow. How do you got to be just like that? Like, I can't do one of them. So, but I bought it, and I walked in his house. I did my first fifth step. When I did my first fifth step, I walked out, and I sat in my car for 20 minutes gripping my steering wheel going, oh, my God, I just told that old guy everything, right? Everything. And it wasn't until later on that evening when I went back home, I did my 6 and 7, I sat quiet, and I had a moment of God, and I just kind of realized that, oh, my gosh, I just told him everything, but I felt like I could already look the world in the eye. Like all of a sudden my head started kind of coming up, and I could have a little bit more peace. And the fifth step promises were coming true right there in front of me. And I was still full of a lot of fear of telling this guy everything. When I did my 8th and my 9th step, and I started looking at my 9th step and started kind of going and making my first amends and my first approaches, I was terrified of doing this, but I knew this, that he would tell me this: how free do you want to be, Chris? How free do you want to be? And I know I wanted to be free from this. I never wanted to drink again, no matter what. I had no idea what to expect. I had none. I just did it because he told me to do it, so I went and did it. And I remember making some few amends, and I remember feeling good about it and feeling like I've righted things. There's some amends I can never make. There's some amends today that are coming back after 32 years of sober that I could never make back then. I still can't make today, but I've got to find a way because it continues to show up in my life. I talked to my sponsor about it the other day, and he was like, we'll figure out a way. We'll figure out a way. I said, okay. I said, because I'm willing. I'm willing to go in. I'm willing to go and go, hey, I did this. I'm willing to show up. I'm willing to be accountable, whatever that looks like. So we'll see. And it's funny how God puts it when it's supposed to happen. He shows the timing of God is pretty amazing stuff. I just didn't want to drink anymore. And I remember one night, I would always avoid the beer aisle in the stores. I'd always go on the other side or around it because for some reason I'm scared to death to walk down the beer aisle because I thought it would jump out and get me, or I thought I would jump in and start drinking. It's Miller time. You know what I mean? I had no clue, and I remember I just avoided it. And I remember one day after I was in the middle of my 9th step, I remember one day being just asleep, dreaming I'm awake, right, even sober, right, and all of a sudden I look up and I'm in the middle of the beer aisle. It's at night. No one's around me. I remember looking to my left and my right, and no one's around me. I'm going, oh man, I'm in the middle of the beer aisle. And it was that just a quick little And then I just stood there, and I don't know what song was playing. I could swear it was a sappy song. I swear it was over the thing. There was no one in the aisle with me, and all of a sudden this big, it was just this moment of God, whether it be a voice or whether it be a thought in my head. All I know is I heard this: I don't think about drinking anymore. Matter of fact, I don't think about not drinking anymore. That was about 8 or 9 months sober. And the miracle of what this thing is happened right then. The miracle of what the 12 steps does happened right then. That the obsession to drink was lifted. In the last 32 years, that obsession to drink has never returned. Not once. That's a miracle coming from a kid who swore to God he would drink every day and he'd run over anybody he had to in order to get it. The obsession was so critical. It was so on me. The allergic reaction that I had to alcohol was big. That day was gone. And I couldn't believe it. I remember standing there crying, and I could have filmed a movie about it because I was just like, oh, I felt like the gecko lizard. That commercial that's out. I really was I was overwhelmed with this feeling of freedom. I'd never known that. So I was placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected the way the book said. I've been living my whole life trying to be protected and safe. My whole life. And right then I had it, boom. My sponsor said, I called him and I said, Bobby, here's what happened. He goes, yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I said, yeah. He goes, but it won't last if you don't continue on. Okay, great. So I continue on. I go into my 10, 11, my 12. And you tell me things like, hey, man, if I've learned this over the years too, if I take the same oomph with my 10, 11 step as I did my 4th step, man, my life goes pretty smoothly. But when I get lazy in this world, or I start resting on my laurels, and I stop doing 10, 11 and night reviews, and I stop doing my prayer meditation the way that I need to do it, if I stop working with other people, then I'm screwed, right? If I stop that, I'm done. I remember calling a guy that later on sponsored me years later. His sponsor was Joe McHugh of Joe and Charlie Big Book Tape, and I called him. I said, hey, man, I'm really depressed. I'm depressed. And first thing he said was, he'd go, hey, well, you know what? It's okay. You're going to be okay. He didn't say, hey, go to the doctor, get any pills. He didn't say any of that stuff. Here's what he said. He's a butt, man. He goes, how many guys you working with, Chris? And I said, a couple. He goes, a couple, like in 2? I said, yeah, a couple. He goes, Chris, you're not depressed. You're lazy. The big book says intensive work with alcoholics, Chris. Intensive. It's too intensive. Intensive means intensive, Chris. They didn't just mess up by putting that word in there. Go work with alcoholics, see what happens. And something transformed when I started working with alcoholics. Now, I'm not saying people aren't depressed in AA, because I get it, been there. But I'm talking about, for me, I'm either going to rely on the steps to do a lot of different stuff that is way beyond outside of just drinking, or I'm not. For me, I hadn't done that. I hadn't worked with alcoholics the way that I needed to. And once I started doing that, my life changed dramatically. When I stopped doing that, my life changes dramatically, right? It's just some key there. I don't know why. So when after I went through the steps the first time, the obsession to drink was lifted, and I was working with the guys. I got probation. I was traveling all over the place doing some things, and I was working for a treatment center, and I was doing some, my life was good, man. I'd never been in love before until I got sober. I fell in love for the first time. I didn't know what that was about. I had no idea what relationships looked like. And I got sober, and I fell in love with this girl, and we were together. It was for 3 years, man. It was it was a great relationship, full of jealousy, anger, and guns. I'm not joking. It was like a nutty, right? And I stayed in that whole thing until she drank again. And I thought, oh, this is unhealthy. She's drinking now. I must leave. Right now, we should have left each other long before that, right? And so, I just got out of this relationship, and life was pretty good. I was going through my first grieving. I'd never done that before. Never felt like these feelings you guys told me about. I hated them. And then all of a sudden I'm working, and life is good, and I got a job, and I'd never been fired before until I got sober. I got fired from my first 2 jobs, right? All the stuff that didn't seem to fit the way it was supposed to, it exactly happened exactly the way it was supposed to in God's world. Crazy. If it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for that, then this would have ever happened. Life is good, man. September 15th, I was walking into work right before midnight. And right when it was midnight, turned into September 16th, right then, I was shot out of nowhere in the middle of the night. It was dark, and I got shot, and a guy shot me with an AK-47, and it ripped to the back of my hip, came out the front of my leg, and blew a hole the size of a softball through my leg. I'm 3.5 years sober. That's not supposed to happen. That's not part of the promises, you know what I mean? Like, that is not part of this deal. And I've been shot once before at 15 because of some other outside issue deal. I was, you know what I'm saying? But when you're 15 years old and you're running a gun and somebody sprays you with a shotgun because you're stealing all their stuff, it makes sense. It's part of the world you live in, right? But this was different. I was already walking around the world and my life was good. And I didn't understand why I'd been shot. And I got flipped upside down, and I thought I was going to die. And I kept looking back over my head, knowing the guy was going to shoot me in the back of the head and kill me. I didn't see the guy who shot me. Pitch black dark, my phone's going off, my alarm on my car is going off the chain. It's loud because of the gunshot. So I'm trying to find my keys in the grass. I have blood squirting all over me, all over my face. I'm covered head to toe in blood, and I know I'm dying. And all this is in seconds, man. But it seemed like a lifetime. And I remember like my mom's face and my sister's face and all the people in my life, right, that I wouldn't necessarily say. They wouldn't, do I know that they even know that I love them? Like, do they know that? Do I tell them enough? Do they know how much I love them? And I remember my life just kind of going like that, and my sponsor and all those people, and then all of a sudden I kept thinking, well, maybe this is where God's going to show himself, that maybe this is where I'm going to have a burning bush, because I hadn't had a burning bush yet. I had some cool things happen for God, but maybe this is where God's going to go, here's your burning bush, I do exist, and I'm going to float away and be happy, right? For some reason, I still had the agnosticism, right? The book says agnostic, and we think that's a black and white issue, but it's agnosticism. The book says agnostic temperament, right? A belief system. So agnostic is a gray area, right? And it's still 3.5 years sober, having all the God experiences I had where I knew God existed, I still went, ooh, I don't know if you got me now, God, right? God can take care of my alcoholism, but I don't think he can take care of all these other areas of my life. That's agnosticism. And here I was laying there thinking God had to show himself one more time to prove that he was there in my life, when he'd done that over and over and over again. And I remember sitting there thinking I was going to see some bright light, burning bush experience. I'm going to see a bright light. I remember laying there, pitch black, man. It's dark outside. There's no lights in this place. And I'm looking up. It's in the middle of the country. I'm looking up at the stars thinking, okay, God, I'm going to have this big giant ball of flame, big bright light. And there was a shooting star that went by. And I was like, that's too small. Couldn't be God. Right? And I'm laying there. And by this time, a guy named Daniel had heard the gunshot. And Daniel had been in Vietnam twice. He went back for the second time because he wanted to. He came back, he heard the gunshot. Now Daniel's hearing helicopters. He is back in Vietnam. He comes at me crouching down. His eyes are this big, and he is not okay. And now I'm more scared of Daniel than I am the guy that shot me, right? Daniel grabs me by the arm. He drags me to safety around the side of the building, and Daniel grabs a stick to go look for a guy with an AK-47. Now it's Daniel, right? I'm laying there and I'm in shock, and the nurse comes out that's on the facility. The nurse comes out, and she literally plunges her hand in this big giant hole in my leg, and she's trying to stop the bleeding. And I'm laying there, and I know I'm going to die, and I don't know what to do. And I'm just going into shock, and my body's starting to shake, and they're trying to just keep me calm. And I'm waiting to see God at some point, because I know I'm going to have a bright light experience at some point. And then all of a sudden, I was praying, and I was looking like down through my feet, right? I was laying down, and I saw this big bright light. It was so bright I couldn't even look at it. Like I had to just turn away. It was just white and bright. It was blinding. I took a deep breath. And as I just tried to look at the light a little bit, and it went from white to red to yellow to orange to white to red to yellow to orange, hooked to an ambulance with a siren. There was no God involved. And every time that white light would go around, it'd be like, there's God, there's God, there's God, there's God, there's God, right? There was no God. One more time he failed me. So I went to the hospital, and in that moment, I'm laying there and I'm in a lot of pain, I'm in a lot of shock, and my friend Jesus Smoking a Camel happened to be there. They were there waiting on the dock for me. Him and his mother, who I'd been kind of part of their family. His mom had gotten dressed so fast that she put her pants on inside out. Her pockets were flapping in the wind, and you can't zip up your zipper from the inside out. And I'm at eye level with my best friend's mother. My experience was only getting worse. My mom is standing there, she's crying. My little sister at the time was young, she's 8 years younger than me, and she's all about science. She wants to see the whole, and it was not a pleasant time. And I'm laying there in this room, and no one's there but Roy, and so I remember going in a lot of pain and shock and fear. And my sponsors tell me that I was driven by fear, and I didn't understand what that meant until he explained to the capacity of looking back at my arrest every time I've been arrested. He goes, driven is like when you get in the back of a cop car. They don't stop where you want them to stop. They drive you to where they want to go. He goes, that's called driven. And right then, I remember laying there, and I was driven one more time, because all of a sudden the same old fear creeped in that I'd been gone. I didn't realize it was gone, but the fear that I'd lived with all my life was gone up until that very moment. I was trying to find a little bit of peace internally because I was really suffering. It wasn't physical. The physical part hurt, but I was more internally just freaking out. And everybody was gone except for Roy. And Roy gets up, and he literally walks over to me, and he grabs my hand. And there's a guy who's a magician, and he's a rock star, right? He's got just, he thinks he is anyway. And his hair is stringy, and he doesn't shower, and he smokes cigarettes all day, and he doesn't take care of himself like that, and he stinks, all that fun jazz. And here this guy is, he leans up over me. We've known each other for 3.5 years at this point, and all he does is he realizes I'm trying to pray to find some type of serenity. And the only prayer that I knew was a serenity prayer, because I couldn't remember all the rest of them. And all he did was simply look at me from about this close, and he just simply said the serenity prayer over and over and over. And I looked up at my best friend in his eyes, and his eyes were blue, and I'll never forget that. And I sat there and I cried, and he cried, and he just prayed for me. And right then I felt the presence of a God that I'd never experienced before. Even the obsession to remove the alcohol, it didn't feel like this. I literally felt something that happened that day between two men of Alcoholics Anonymous that I still see the day when I'm working with another drunk, when I'm in the middle of sponsoring a guy and I watch them and their eyes light up. It's the same experience. That another man would love me enough to say, hey, I don't want you to be in pain anymore. I'm going to pray for you. How intimate is that? Man, Roy's heard me speak hundreds of times. He's heard me tell that story hundreds of times all over the world. One day we were in New Orleans, I spoke. I was 20 years sober. And I sat down next to him afterwards to eat dinner, and he was sitting right here on my right side with a table full of people. I just spoke about this. And I look over at Roy, and I'm like, Roy, you got brown eyes. He goes, yeah, I know. I was like, you always had brown eyes? He goes, yeah, always. I went, you've heard me speak hundreds of times about your blue eyes, and you're not going to correct me one time? Why? He goes, it ain't my story, it's yours and God's. That night, his eyes were different. They were not brown. I'm talking about like black brown, like brown, right? They were different. I don't know why. I have no idea. But all I know is that was a different deal that night. I've had some amazing experiences in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got married in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got divorced in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got shot in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been able to travel the world, speaking all over the world of something that I didn't ever think I have anything to give to anybody else. I get to work all over the world. I get to travel. I get to have amazing experiences every day. I got reconnected with my dad after years. And I had a sister that blew her head off at 19 from this disease. And I had a brother that died at 32 from drinking himself to death. And when you think about it from that standpoint and why I'm being given a gift of being sober with all the things that have gone on in my life, that I'm still here, standing here, and I'm able to even talk, then it's that simple. It's that simple. And these two wonderful people are now my angels. When I close my eyes, I think about them and the suffering they had to go through in order to do what they did. And what the grace of God falls equally on them as it does on me. And but I've been given a gift to be around here and be able to do the things that I'm doing, to be able to try to live a life that I want to live. My sponsor always goes into the bedevilments, and he goes into some stuff around the fear, and he talks about unable to make a living. We talk about the bedevilments on page 52, and I always thought that would mean financially. He goes, no, make a living like in how do you like your living? Are you being able to, or do you love the way your life is? And I can't always say that's true. There's sometimes I really love the way my life is, and other years that didn't like it. I'd like to do something different. Today, my life is filled with two daughters that I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't know how to change a diaper. I was in a lot of fear. And man, let me tell you what I learned from those two, and I'm gonna wrap it up. My youngest daughter, one time, she's taught me a whole bunch of crazy stuff, man. 4 years old I should have 4-year-olds sponsor me. That's the level I love, right? My youngest daughter, one time, she taught me this. She said, we pulled up to the light one time, and there was a homeless guy on there with a sign that said, hey, I work for food, and she didn't know what it meant. I told her, well, he's trying to get money for food. She goes, oh, he didn't have any money for food? I said, no. She goes, you're going to give him money? I said, no. She goes, well, why not? But she couldn't understand that. She had the back of her car seat. I said, well, because a lot of them are cons, they're not real. And so listen what I'm trying to teach my young daughter, right, about the world. Well, a lot of them are cons and they're not real. They don't need money. I remember watching her process it all. And then she goes, but you don't know that. I said, no, I don't know that. She goes, but you don't know whether he needs money or not needs money. I said, yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. She goes, huh? She goes, yeah. She goes, Dad, if it was me, I would give him money. And I hope when I'm older, my heart doesn't change. I went, ow, right? I want my heart to be the person that gives money regardless. Like, I want my heart to be that kind of purity and love. I have a bunch of powerful women in my life. Like, she's one of them. She was in a tub one day splashing water all over the damn place, and I walk in there, she was little, and I said, wow, I was going to be this parent. You're getting water all over the place. She had blonde hair. She looks at me and goes, Dad, look at me, I'm a big wave, I'm powerful. And I went, splash on, powerful wave. I shut that door, and I said, that's what it's about, right? It's about being like that. And then my oldest daughter, we were praying one night, and she was about 4 years old, and then we were praying, and she goes, God, I just want to thank you for, this is not, a couple years after the divorce. She goes, I got to clarify this. She goes, God, I just want to thank you for my dad. And I was like, yeah, God, that's me. And she goes, and God, I'd like to thank you for my mom. I was like, yeah, okay. And, and she goes, with all sincerity, this little girl goes, and God, thank you for all the candy I had today. I just started crying because I thought about it. I was like, that's exactly what my life is. When I look at it from a different viewpoint, when I look at it from perception that today I'm worried about my kids, I'm worried about financial, I'm worried about living life, having relationships, I'm worried about work, I'm worried about all the stuff that I never had even anything like that, remotely like that when I was using and drinking, right? I was worried about commissary, my lawyers showing up, whether I would get my drugs or alcohol, all that stuff. What a big difference. Today I take moments, and I'll end it with this. My kids probably get tired of the text messages of how wonderful I think they are. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter who they show up as in life. I just know they're great, and all of a sudden I know that in my life, my love for them doesn't change, and their value as women, it doesn't change. They're valuable 100% all the time. From somebody who knows how to change a diaper to be able to love somebody that purely, regardless of what goes on, and to be able to be there for them no matter what. No matter if we fight, cry together, laugh together, it doesn't matter. I have moments today where I take moments. When I usually like the moment of serenity prayer, I take a full moment. And in that moment, I think of all the people in my life that I've missed, that I love, that are no longer here, and how grateful I am for the people in my life, that moment by moment, that they matter, that one moment. I'm very grateful to be able to be here today. I'm kind of out of it today, so thank you for bearing with me. I've had a weird week. And so I love you guys. Thank you so much.